guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Back to the show is Anthony Lee. How you doing, Anthony?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm very, very good. So today, obviously Anthony's been on the show before. I think you've probably done about 20 shows since we began in 2017, maybe a bit more. So I think most of the audience are well versed in you, but do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I have been, I guess, in the Amazon game since 2014. Started as a brand owner and then took on several consulting clients. Then helped to grow Zonblast, which later became Six Leaf. Moved from there to Helium 10, Helium 10 to Signalytics, Signalytics to Canopy Management, and now taking a much less active role and helping my friends at Signalytics again.
Yeah.
So had a lot of access to data, done a lot of experiments myself, and yeah, that's basically in a nutshell my experience in this realm.
Cool. So we're going to be talking about behavioral science with a leaning towards listing optimization. When there's pointless covering listing optimization, it's done to death. People are smart; they know what to do. The ball hasn't really. Sorry, the ball. The what was the word I'm looking for? There's certain words that it hasn't really moved, is it? Like there's standards. I mean, there's tons of content out there. We don't need to speak about that.
Yeah,
But we'll get into some of the nuances. So you've done some stuff on behavioral science, and you're implementing these in terms of how you structure listings and what kind of feedback that you're getting from those. So yeah, do you want to give a little introduction, and then we'll start getting into it?
sure. I do want to say though, it's not just that I'm implementing these
No,
things,
there's
but
yeah,
this is stuff that I've done a deep analysis of some of the more successful listings and
mm,
also seen patterns, which is what prompted us to start, testing a lot of this stuff.
yeah,
But for the most part, like just like you said, optimization's kind of been beat to death, and a lot of people, especially your listeners, are savvy
mm,
enough to understand. Yes, they need to take it seriously. Yes, it needs to be, professional quality, but um, I hit that same wall, right? So it's like, okay, we know what to do with a good listing.
yeah,
And yet, even still, some listings would outperform, you know?
yeah,
And the question always comes up like, how, if I am at the top of my game and I've been doing it for this long and I know
mm,
exactly what to do, how how am I still
missing.
befuddled by what these competitors that are doing better than me
Mm,
are doing?
yeah,
And that's where this next kind of level comes in, where it's like, okay, well, it pulls on a lot more triggers than Amazon sellers are aware of through
mm,
the lens of Amazon selling.
yeah. Cool. Where do you want to start with this? This gives. Do you want to give some examples where you were looking at certain listings that performed exceptionally well, and some of the findings around that?
Sure. So the when I was looking at the listings, if the first searches are always kind of simple, right? You're always looking for, okay, well, obviously it has to rank well.
Yeah.
So you look at where it ranks with regard to search frequency and brand analytics. You also just look on the Amazon platform. You see, obviously, we all know that rank can be, for lack of a better term, manipulated.
Mm,
so, so you take that with a grain of salt, but look in and kind of verify. Then you're looking at BSR. Then you're looking at reviews. Actually, looking at the quality of the reviews to see if these are real people. Look at their review history. You can really dive in and figure out whether or not a listing appears at least to deserve its place in the ranking, and also how well it's doing outside of just that one keyword rank. And so I was digging in to actually try to find good listings, and for this particular kind of set of data, I didn't want to exclude big brands.
mm,
Most of the time, I exclude big brands because it's like the only concern that I have is what other third party, private label or smaller brand sellers are doing to achieve their success. But in this particular instance, I thought, we're talking about the whole of how the behavior of the consumer that shops on Amazon. We're talking about the whole of what they're doing, and big brands play a part in that. So I would like to see if they're pulling any, obvious levers too. So that's where I looked, just top performing listings in a number of different categories to try and dissect if there was any commonalities.
Yeah. And what do we see?
Well, as to be expected, there are commonalities, but they're not. It's not as obvious as everybody thinks, right? Like, oh, here's the thing about the way listing optimization is approached right now. It's always, keep it under this many characters, right? It's always hit this particular structure in your bullet points. It's always keep your description this many characters, have at least this many images in your A plus. It's always the technicals.
Yeah.
And when you're looking for technicals, then you're starting to see, okay, well, sometimes they have, stuff in common. I guess we'll find all the ones that are doing really well and also have this stuff in common. And that's what a lot of people end up doing when they try to do teachings on optimization. But if you look at the quality and character of the actual words and images and presentation, it starts to paint a different picture. And then you see that there really is a very kind of common thread. What I noticed, particularly with regard to the copy, was that what we're always taught may not necessarily be true, which is wild for me because I used to teach this stuff too, right? So basically what we tell everybody in the world of copywriting, if you really want to do good copy for a listing on Amazon or any other marketplace, you want to write benefit-driven copy. That's the way it's always said, right? You want to write benefit-driven copy. And then you get some examples of what a difference of a feature and a benefit is. And that's where everybody lives. When you get deeper into that, you start learning about, oh, well, it needs to be kind of emotionally driven because that's why consumers buy consumer products, right? It's because they have, they're driven emotionally. Okay. So how do you do that? It's a lot easier said than done, but some people they figure it out or they accidentally stumble upon it more often than not, and they're happy with the result there. And that's where like the elite Amazon sellers live. What I noticed though was that this pattern isn't true, and the reason is because it depends on the audience, right? And so I started really diving in. I was looking at all these different categories, and I'm looking at the type of audience that's buying these products, right? And I noticed, not everybody is actually looking for a specific benefit. I'll give you a prime example. If you've ever heard the term 0 to 60 in like 2.5 seconds, right? That's a car. That's something that somebody uses to sell a really fast car. Notice that that's not a benefit. That's a feature. Why does that work? And it's because the kind of person that buys a car that goes that fast is looking for a rich feature set. Yeah. What they're looking for is the list of reasons why their car is better than yours, basically. I mean, I hope that doesn't sound insulting to people who like fast cars. I'm just...
No, and we say it respectfully. It comes from a point of ego. It makes them feel good. What car have you got, etc., etc. Yeah, it does 0 to da 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 da. It's impressive. Exactly. So it's like, and I've got one of these. It's one of those things, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at that, you're like, okay, hold on a second. This isn't benefit-driven copy that's doing the selling here. Yeah. So then you dive deeper and you're like, okay, where does this benefit-driven stuff come from? Well, if you have a specific benefit you're looking for, which is normally a problem you're trying to solve, right? Like, my grill is disgusting. I need a grill brush that works because the last one I used, it didn't work and all the bristles fell apart. You're trying to solve a specific problem. So you're looking for a specific benefit. In that instance, yeah, benefit-driven copy is probably good, but like all the other benefits are ancillary. For the most part, you're just looking to solve this one problem. Yeah. And then that person is very different from somebody who makes, almost everybody makes their consumer purchases on an emotional level, but there are plenty of people who make impulse buys that, like, basically they went in and they bought without knowing that that's what they were going to buy. Those people aren't looking for a specific benefit, issue. These people live in a world where they're not just trying to solve problems, because that's the other lie we're taught, is that you have to solve a problem. But a lot of times they just have desires they want to fulfill. And it's a lot easier to get them to feel like they're fulfilling that desire if you trigger an emotion. And that's where the emotional copy works. So you notice that you have these different kinds of users, and different language speaks to them. And what I notice is that there are some listings on Amazon that do this very effectively, but nobody actually teaches optimization like that. Nobody looks at it and says, okay, well, the language changes based on your demographic, basically the audience that you're speaking to. The language changes, right? Because when you're talking about eliciting an emotion, when you're talking about the feeling of, not being so afraid because you have this personal security item, like maybe a taser or something, and you're buying it for your child, that same language is not what you use to sell a grow brush. So you have to change, you have to know your audience. And basically I guess that's the crux of it. And a lot of people say, yeah, know your audience, but it's deeper than that, because you're not knowing your audience. What most people teach that for is so that you know what to sell them. You're not knowing your audience just to know what to sell them, but you also have to know how to make them understand that what you have to offer fits their personality type in the moment that they're in, when they're shopping on Amazon and looking for, or not looking for, whatever it is they're looking for or not looking for. I know that sounded kind of circular, but like that's our brains. They're kind of mushy and weird. So
and so what other discoveries you made before we get into the points of, well, how would you implement that? We've been chatting last 10, 12 minutes or so about this, and then it's like, oh, how does the listeners implement this for themselves?
Sure. Well, here's the thing: is I'm actually really. It's funny. I'm kind of notorious for this, right? We teach this stuff, and then that it used to be hot, and then nobody does it anymore because the next hot thing comes. And then I usually come in and go, actually, remember that thing that we haven't talked about in like a year? Well, that's still working. So I'm about to do that again. How you implement, the first step in implementing this is looking at your competitor reviews. We already know this, right? People
No
do
shit,
that.
Sherlock.
But they're always looking at the reviews through the lens of, let me look at the negative stuff and see how I can improve the product, which is a very important step. Yes, please improve your product. You have to have a quality product. But now I want you to look at the reviews and look at the language that the reviewers are using to figure out what communication style works best for them. If you see them rattling off all of the things that they want to see and don't see, or the things that are missing, that's a feature list kind of person. Chances are that product is a luxury product, and this is an ego-driven purchase. In that case, that's going to color the language very differently. If you see people using a lot of language that indicates an emotion felt, that's a completely different person. If you see everybody is focused on one specific benefit, that's, this all colors the way that you're going to write your listing to convey the message to your potential audience that what you're selling is something that they'll enjoy. So read the reviews, just change the lens and how you're reading them. Maybe read them twice, read them once for feature, for product feature, product improvements, and then another time to like kind of create this dossier of copy language for your particular avatar. We have for lack of a deeper explanation of how the brain is structured, we basically have a subconscious and a conscious. Subconscious processes like 11 million bits of data per second. The conscious can only process like 40,000, right? That's a huge rift. And the reason is because the conscious mind takes an absurd amount of energy to run and process, right? But we see way more than 40,000 bits of data every
Yeah.
second. And that's why basically the subconscious is taking it all in. It takes all the information in first.
Hmm.
It does more with more.
Yeah.
The difference is the subconscious doesn't have a means to communicate with you, your person, wherever you are in your brain,
Yeah.
in a way that it's like laid out obviously, right?
Mhm.
Subconscious uses emotion.
Yeah.
And that's not very obvious. It's kind of ambiguous. The conscious brain is the one that's like, okay, this is what's going on. And we kind of interpret that as logic because we understand it so much better.
Yeah.
Everybody out there, though, all of us are receiving information
Hmm.
and we're reacting to it more often than not in an emotional manner first.
Yeah.
And then the next step is, what our logic wants to do with it. With regard to consumer purchases,
Hmm.
most of the time,
Yeah.
this is why when I talk about stuff like this, I always talk about the squirrel brain. The squirrel brain is the emotion center.
Yeah.
The ape brain is the logic center.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the squirrel brain is in the cockpit. And when we have consumer purchases, most of the time, the reason why I say that's an emotional driven process for men and women
Yeah.
is because the ape brain always does a cost benefit analysis. And
Mhm.
if the cost benefit analysis was done on every consumer purchase, we would never buy anything. We wouldn't
Yeah.
buy anything because we'd
Yeah.
be like, I don't need a microfiber towel. I have the t-shirt that now has holes in it and I can't wear anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's how so when we buy something, that's the squirrel being like, you don't even need to be involved, ape.
Yeah.
Like I got this.
Yeah.
And that's you wanting to fulfill a desire or to solve a problem. And whether that desire is, to for status, or even life force. What is it called? Life force 8. Even the stuff that we feel like we need for life.
Yeah.
Still, we're making those decisions on an emotional basis because we provide for our family because we want to make sure that we feel like we are doing enough to make them safe and happy.
Yeah.
And so it's all connected in that way. I think we do a lot of mental gymnastics to make it seem like we're more logical than we actually are most of the time.
Yeah.
All humans. It's just
Mhm.
that human trait because we've somehow managed to elevate, especially in our society,
Yeah.
this idea that the rational being is superior.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah,
Which is
regardless,
bullshit. That's just chop wanking, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
but regardless of who's making those decisions, at the end of the day, you have a human being on the keyboard.
Mm.
And essentially what they're doing when they're on the Amazon platform is there's a squirrel basically sitting on their shoulder and they're being like, ooh, that'd be cool. Ooh,
Yeah.
no, that'd be cool. We need that.
Yeah.
And that's who they're fighting with the whole time to
Yeah.
make the basket as small as they can get away with because the ape is still there. Like it's all integrated. He's like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't think we have the budget for that. You should probably maybe just put that one back. Like that's the battle.
So if we were to summarize this bit here, is the way that we have, like, it's almost like it's inline, right? So instead of a progression of logic first, emotion second, or emotion first, logic second, they're running parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then obviously there's two sides of the brain that are working, like you said. Yeah, so I'm just, because obviously there's a lot of stuff we unpacked there.
Yeah.
Started from the suggested science, which you've happily corrected. So we're working on a parallel aspect of our decision making, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously there's a point there where the commitment comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the commitment part work whilst both sides of the brain is working here, emotion and logic, in order to confirm at the end? Because like you said, if we just used our monkey brain all the time to run our logic, if I'm terming it right here,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't buy anything.
Yeah.
So we need something in there to spur that on. So what are some of those attributes there?
Okay, so when you say that they're running parallel, you're correct. But
Mm.
one thing needs to be understood though.
Yeah.
The squirrel is way more active
Yeah.
because the ape, it just takes too much energy,
Mm.
right? So you could kind of imagine that the ape, the logic brain,
Mm.
is asleep most of the time. That'd probably be the best analogy, right?
Right.
I mean, he's not really, but like he's just not putting that much effort getting involved because it's just man, it's a massive amount of energy.
Yeah.
So all of the data is coming to the squirrel. The squirrel's like, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
So when those decisions are made, most of the time, and it depends, it's different on every person, but most of the time it doesn't trigger a need. So basically the logic part is going to come in.
Yeah.
If a cost benefit analysis needs to be done, most of the time it presents itself in the form of what's called buyer's remorse.
Right.
Buyer's remorse can happen after, or in some instances it can hit you before you hit, because there's so many processes involved. Like,
Yeah.
I know Amazon's like, oh, one click. It's not really one click though. Like, you had to set up a whole bunch of stuff before you got that button to do one click. So there is a process involved, and buyer's remorse can set in before you get all the way to the end. And that's basically when the ape steps in and says, hey, look, this isn't the best thing for our budget. And it changes for every person. But essentially, he's only getting involved when that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's like the rich dad who says, okay, you can have the credit card. Leave me alone. So what's happening is, for the most part, most of these purchases are made, when it sounds in such a way that it's not completely true when I say most of it is just all an emotional process. But for the most part, what's happening is we feel okay. We have an idea in our head, a budget that our logical brain has said, okay, well, you can set this aside, and it'll be okay for you to spend this amount. Anything over that, you probably want to reassess. And so with that budget in mind, we're out there and we may or may not be deciding we want to buy something, but we see some things that interest us, and then it's easier for us to click the button and say, all right, I did this. And then there's no fighting about it in the brain. We exceed that, and that's when things get a little hairy. But for the most part, once you're on the Amazon site, once you're on the Amazon site, you're in a shopping mall. You've already convinced yourself that you're here. They have your credit card already. You gave
have
it to them.
buyer's intent. As soon as you put the keyword in for
Exactly.
the product you're looking for, there's a buyer's intent there, isn't there?
I would argue that as soon as you went to the Amazon app or the website, you had the buyer's intent.
Before you done the search term, because you've made the determined to go to the destination.
Yeah. So you already know that this is what you do here, right? You don't. You're not there to like taste food. You're here to buy something. So it's Amazon does a really good job of making that slope kind of slippery, where it's like it's easy for you. You get there and you're like, okay, I can make decisions. It's displayed in such a way they've got tons of data on this where it aesthetically it looks right. We're able to easily read it, and then we can say, oh, these are things that look very appealing, and then it's really easy to fill up the basket and buy all the way up and till the point where, depending on our personal budgets, we go, okay, now I need to slow down a little bit. And then some people even struggle with being able to do that. Those are the kind of people that have like a whatever it is that gamblers suffer from, where they completely blow past that boundary and then they have to revisit and go, oh my gosh, like that was such a bad idea.
So we've unpacked a huge amount there. So to tally off on the show now, some actionable points. Some of the stuff we covered has been quite interesting. I've learned a lot here as well. Brain processing, etc., etc. Because obviously, when you look at different research, you've got to look at the data, and then you've got to extrapolate, right? Haven't you? And then you've got to try and get balanced peer reviews and etc., etc. And you brought some really interesting points that I didn't know on the brain side of how it would work, rather than a follow-on process to be side by side, in layman's terms. Actionable. You're sitting down now, you're re-looking at your listing. What we're telling the audience here, Anthony.
All right. So step one, like I said, you look at your competitors' reviews.
Yeah.
Dissect these reviews to see the kind of language that they use. What you're looking for is, are there very specific and very outlined benefits that they're trying to have? Basically, are there problems that they're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Just really, really easy. Like, look at very specific things. Are they trying to get their clothes to smell better?
Yeah.
Are they trying to keep mold off of the linen?
Yeah.
If you don't see that, look and see if they have a tendency to pick at a specific feature, not a benefit, but a specific feature, whether it's there or it's not there.
Yeah.
if that particular feature is important to them. And then if you don't see either of those things, look and dissect the language to see if they use language that prompts an emotion, right? Are they talking about how they feel? Are they talking about whether or not they had an emotional reaction? Did it make them cry or laugh? And I would say keep it to those three things.
Yeah.
Once you figure out which one of those are, this is the type of audience you're speaking to, and that's how you craft your listing. So next step, you're still going to do all the keyword research. You're still going to do, all of the stuff to kind of SEO it for the algorithms perspective. But when you word it, people who are interested in features, you want to give them as many as possible, because that's what they want. They want to know that they're winning, and how they win is just a list of, it does this, it does this, it does this, it does this, it does this. There's 49 things that this thing does. That's what they're looking for. So you can give them that list. You can still lead with the benefit in front of the feature, but for the most part, they just want to know that this thing does a million things. If it's the kind of person that's looking for a specific solution, don't waste so much time listing all the other stuff it does. What they want to know is that it does this one thing or these two things better than everybody else. So that's when you want to focus on the benefit and the benefit to their lives using this, because you're so focused on this one thing. Like, they're worried about mold in the linen. Your linen's not going to get mold. And these are the reasons why, because this stuff is top grade desiccant, right? It absorbs all of the moisture. Look at the data here. It shows you that the moisture is absorbed better than these things. Comparison's really good too. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, like, focus on the thing that's important to them instead of trying to give them, all of the other stuff. Because a lot of times that it wastes time, it wastes energy. When you're sitting there and they're like, yeah, I just, go back to the car analogy. You're there buying a car. You really need something that fits your whole family. And your primary concerns are gas mileage and size. And they're sitting there talking about the size of the engine and how fast it can go. And it's like, you don't care about all that stuff. Like, focus on what they care about. And then if you find people who use a lot of emotional language, you want to use emotional language. You want to use language that triggers the potential for emotion, at least getting them thinking about it, right? So what you want to use is a lot of language that kind of gets them to stop and think and imagine, right? So one of the examples that I made was, if you're selling one of those convertible cribs that turns into a toddler bed that turns into a double bed, so it's a bed that, like, you can say that it'll serve your child throughout their life until you're crying at their graduation. The use of the word crying, like, that's an emotional trigger, right? And all of a sudden they're thinking in their head about being at graduation and being that emotional, and that gets them thinking about that. So you want to use language that speaks to them, which is emotional language. Talk about how they will feel when they use your product. So that's how I would write it, based on the audience. And then things that work universally. I mentioned comparisons. Videos and comparisons, and even better than all of that is video comparisons. When I say comparison, it's because the way that our minds, how do we know that we have to have a baseline for everything? We compare everything to everything, like literally everything to everything. Every moment is subconscious most of the time.
Which generally in life, a lot of people do. They compare. Well, they've got that, I've got this, and it's true, right?
Yeah.
And not always for the positive, because obviously it can create low self-esteem and stuff in people as well.
Yes.
But it is pretty much modeled on that, unless you don't focus on those things. But a lot of people do, don't they? Keeping up with the Joneses, their car, they've got one of those, I want one of those, etc.
Well, I'm not even talking about comparing yourself to other people. Literally, the way our brains work is we have to have a standard unit to compare everything to. So for example, like, I'm sitting at this desk.
I'm giving that as an example. That's just one example. People will tend to compare themselves to others, right? So it understands that if your brain works in a certain way, it's another pattern that it's going to follow. It's going to compare different products to each other as well. Because it's used to it. It feels like home. Yeah.
Well, you have to have a standard. So when you're shopping, you're looking for, what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for the best product at the best price. Like, that's That is the logic that's been instilled by the ape brain. Everybody, even the squirrel
Wants,
knows that. Like,
yeah.
I need the best product for the best price because I'm not an
Mm,
idiot, right?
mm,
Well, because we're looking for the best, we have to have a standard unit of comparison every
yeah.
time. And this is in a subconscious process most of the time. I'm sitting at
Yeah.
a desk right now, and immediately my brain has assessed whether or not this desk is too tall based
Mm,
on something that I have experienced in the past that was comfortable.
yeah.
It's just the way it works. So, because of that, the best way to show people that basis is not just to show them your product in action, which is very important, but to show it in action against something inferior so that people can see the basis. Like, okay, so that's the standard right there on the
Mm,
left, the inferior one. And this is what I'm getting, which is better. That is so important. And I know, you know, so one of the great minds in this space, Anthony Confrancisco, I hope I said his last name right.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, he
I'm murder when it comes to mispronouncing people's names, as they know on this show.
well,
Yours is easy because it's Anthony and it's Lee. There's not much to mess up. But yeah, generally
you're
that's
right.
one of my key faux pas is butchering people's names by accident.
Oh goodness, yeah, no doubt. But anyway, so Anthony did a presentation where he dives into like dissecting images a lot of the
Mm,
same way that I dissect copy, right? Like
yeah,
it's really good.
yeah,
One of the things that he said though in the research that they did and
yeah.
all of the listing analysis they did was that comparison images didn't seem to make much of a difference. And I took issue with that, and I kind of dug deeper into why he
Mm,
said that. And one of the things is because the vast majority of comparison images on Amazon are asinine, right? You're talking about like somebody was selling a kid's pool, and then it was literally an overhead shot of being larger by about 6 inches diameter than
mm.
the competitor. And it's like
Who cares?
most of the people buying that product are not going to care so much about the
Mm,
extra 6 inches because they're buying it for their kid. Their
yeah.
only concern is it safe and are they going to think it's fun? And that
Mm,
6 inch diameter is not a factor in that. So
yeah.
the reason that his data brought back that comparisons weren't really making much of a difference is because people don't do it right. What
Mm,
you have to do is actually demonstrate. And that's why I say video is way better at this because it's a
yeah.
lot easier doing video. But you have to actually demonstrate the product fulfilling the desire or solving the problem or displaying the feature set
Mm,
better than a competitor.
yeah.
Like that's the thing. And then when you show that effectively, it really does a wonder for conversions. Like conversion rates will increase dramatically because that solves the problem for them. They're like, okay, this is what I should normally expect from a product like this, and
Mm,
this is what I'm about to get if I buy this one. It's definitely better.
yeah.
Perceived value, price can increase in their head because the perceived value has increased dramatically, and all of this kind of mixes together to create the highest possible conversion event, which
Yeah.
is what we're looking for as Amazon sellers.
Indeed. Cool. What's the best way for people to reach you nowadays?
You can reach me. So Anthony at signalytics.ai. Like I said, I'm helping my friends at Signalytics out again. That's my public email. You can also always reach me on all of the social channels. I don't post as much anymore because I'm kind of laid back doing a lot of my own stuff, but
Mm,
I'm still there, and
yeah.
I will answer any questions you have. If you happen to connect with me on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, I'm on all the channels.
Excellent. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Anthony, thank you for joining us. Sharon will be back in the chair next, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care of yourself and your
Thank
family.
you.
Much love, and I'll see you again.